The Eagles beat Houston quietly Thursday night to go 8-0 for the first time ever, and 11-0 looks very likely. The NFC East is a raging beast. It's hard to win the quarterback lottery, and Aaron and Tom are sitting by the bays watching the tide roll away. That's next on This Week in Pro Football.
It's time for This Week in Pro Football, a deep dive into the key issues and marquee matchups in the National Football League. For the next 60 minutes, we invite you to sit back or lean in with host Pat Callahan as we preview the week's Eagles matchup, big games, breaking stories, and all news NFL. It's This Week in Pro Football, right now on JAKIB Media Sports.
Hello, everybody. Pat Callahan joining you for week number 9 of This Week in Pro Football here on JAKIB Sports. Thanks very much for sitting in with me for the next hour as we talk about the National Football League. Please give me a follow on Twitter at TWIPF Pat. You can also follow the station at JAKIB Sports. Another action-packed week 9 kicked off with the Philadelphia Eagles defeating the Houston Texans 29-17. We'll be talking about that game and about the Philadelphia team starting off 8-0 for the first time ever and just rumbling through the schedule on their way to what I think will be an 11-0 matchup with the Tennessee Titans. Sal Paolantonio is going to be joining me in just a few minutes. We're going to be talking the usual props and bets with Sean Green from Bet SGPN. I've got my good boy Tony Cutillo joining me to talk fantasy football, and then Gary Myers at the bottom of the show to talk about the week's schedule and the Washington franchise and where the hell it's going from here. All right, Xander, if you want to bring up a little what the hell's going on out there, we could talk about what is going on out there. The Eagles win 29-17 over Houston. Houston put up a good fight, and the first crack in the Eagles' veneer maybe showed up when the Texans managed to run for 139 yards. Dameon Pierce having a nice day on 17 carries. But still, I didn't think the game was ever in doubt. Philadelphia just has that look right now of a team that can rise to whatever occasion you want them to rise to. At least that's the way it looks to me. And I have to take back what I was saying earlier. The Eagles now starting to demonstrate they can hit some chunk plays, be it running or passing. So Philadelphia looks very strong right now defensively. Like I said, little weak against the run yesterday, but it never really got them in danger, I thought. Meanwhile, there are 3 sacks, a couple more picks. Philadelphia looking very good. Robert Quinn really hasn't even asserted himself yet, and we'll see how that goes. A little talk later on about sophomore quarterbacks. You know, the league is so quarterback dominated, and yet you can see that the 2021 class not yet, I should say, rising to the occasion. Zach Wilson, he looks lost for the New York Jets. I don't care what the record is. It's not because of Zach Wilson. 3 more picks against New England. The Jets have lost 13 straight times to the Patriots. That's not hard. That's not easy to do. Trevor Lawrence doesn't look like a number 1 overall right now. Jacksonville started off strong. Remember, they came to Philadelphia, and we were talked about the game and said it was going to be a tough one. Jacksonville did play better that day, but they have not done anything since. Losers of 5 straight, and they're seemingly gone their usual. Headed to Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence not looking that good for the Jaguars right now for Doug Peterson. Sitting on the dock of the bays, Tampa and Green Bay. What is going on there? We'll talk to Gary about that later. The Packers and the Buccaneers have really, really fallen on some hard times. And what is going on? Green Bay just looks listless to me. And the Buccaneers look very tentative. I wonder if the Buccaneers are just aging in place and whether that's got something to do with it. Their offensive stars are all clearly on the far side of first or second year players. Guys like Fournette, Brady, Godwin, even Mike Evans. They're just banged up all the time. Doesn't look good in Tampa Bay at all. They play the Rams Sunday in what should have been a good game. May not be. The NFC East is an absolute beast. You look at the standings right now. We'll do that later on. But the Eagles at 8-0, Dallas 6-2. The New York Giants of all teams sitting at 6-2, and even the Commanders have gotten themselves to 4-4. There's not a losing team in the division. Washington on a 3-game win streak, perhaps fired up by the news that Dan Snyder might sell the team. The that division went from by far the worst in football to all of a sudden the strongest in football. A credit to each team in the division. As I said, we're going to have some picks later on. We're going to have some props. We got some fantasy, and fantasy explosion happened last week with 5 guys scoring 3 touchdowns in games last week. And if you had them, well, then you look good. If you didn't, well, you probably lost. So we'll talk fantasy with Tony at the bottom of the hour. All right, Xander, why don't we bring my first guest in here, if we might? That would be, of course, Sal Paolantonio, the host of the NFL Matchup Show on ESPN, my good buddy and a stalwart participant here in This Week in Pro Football for 19 years. How you doing, Sal?
Pat, good. How are you? Doing good. Happy week 9 in the National Football League. We're playing November football, Pat. Right. This is where the rubber meets the road, as we like to say.
Well, Sal, you were kind enough to send me some post-game stats from the Eagles-Texans game, and one really struck me, and that is that the Eagles are the first team in 50 years with a positive turnover differential in their first 8 games. Your thoughts on that?
Well, that's the thing that they preach. Nick Sirianni and Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator, they preach, we're going to win the double positives. We're going to win the turnover battle, and we're going to win the explosive plays. It's something they preach. It is something they practice. And, of course, it comes down to the quarterback, right? If your quarterback doesn't turn the ball over, it's like your number 4 hitter not striking out. Yep. You're going to win a lot of football games. Now, he did have a fumble lost last night, but once again, he had a game without an interception. 21 of 27 and 2 touchdowns. Sacked 4 times, no interceptions. So that's the key. Plus, I don't know what the Saints were doing. This has got to be the dumbest trade that ever. They just apparently couldn't afford Gardner Johnson. But this guy has infused not only a takeaway ability that this team hasn't seen at the safety position since Brian Dawkins, and that's pretty high praise. But he also infuses a sense of real live energy into that defense. He and Slay and Bradbury's a little bit more reserved, but he and Slay are instilling a ball hawking, and they are tough. They're tough players.
They certainly are. And the defensive line, and even got stronger now with Quinn, but 3 sacks last night. But Sal, also the confidence, as you mentioned, in that secondary, you can just see how much confidence there is in the Eagles secondary, that they were just looking into the backfield, playing the game along with Davis Mills, and they weren't fazed at all by what he was doing. The other thing I want you to comment on is I had been challenging the Eagles for the first 7 weeks about the lack of chunk plays. But they certainly, against Pittsburgh, they fixed that in the first quarter and still demonstrated it last night, both throwing and running the ball. I don't see a real chink in the armor here, at least at this point. Do you?
Well, it's been 2 weeks since I've been on the show, so we got to talk about Pittsburgh and Houston. And if you remember, I texted you during the Pittsburgh game, and I said, okay, now we know, Pat, what this team was doing during the bye. They were working on their drop-back passing game. There were some RPOs. There were some triple options in that game. But for the most part, the chunk plays came out of straight drop-back throws against the Steelers' defense without T.J. Watt, with their secondary hurting. But nevertheless, it was double coverage, and A.J. Brown came down with the football. So, the chunk plays are now – if you can get some chunk plays – and as Jalen Hurts said last night in Houston, if you take away the pass, we can run it. If you take away the run, we can throw it.
Yeah.
So it's a very well-coached team. It really is. It's really very well-coached. And the number 1 coach happens to be Jalen Hurts, in my view.
Yeah. Javon Hargrave, 3 sacks, as I mentioned. And the other thing that struck me, Sal, is take, for instance, the Eagles have a 3rd goal to 5-yard line. With the score, what was it? I think the Eagles were up at that point 14-7. They run the ball. Whatever Hurts saw, or however the play got called, how many teams in the NFL these days run the ball on 3rd and goal from the 5-yard line? I'll tell you the answer: 1. And yet it goes for a touchdown. And I just think it just shows tremendous field awareness by whoever made that call and by Hurts for executing it. He really seems like to have made an amazing leap, Sal, from the playoff loss to Tampa 10 scant months ago to where he is today?
Well, you said it, Pat. So number one, confidence. Number two, competence. And three, comfortable with his situation. He's been put into a situation where people around him are helping him be better day in and day out. And he already has that DNA because his dad is a coach and Nick Sirianni's dad is a coach. So they're pushing one another, and they've created this addictive philosophy of, hey, don't tell me about going 7-0. We're going 1-0.
Right.
And they took a roundhouse punch from Houston, and the game was close.
Yeah.
Late in the third quarter, it was close. And yet they found a way to grind out a win on the road on Thursday night.
Yeah.
Even though the Houston Texans proved that they could run the ball, and that's what they do well, the one thing that they do well, and the Eagles were without Jordan Davis, but the rest of the team rallied, and they got to win. It's hard to win on the road, hard to win in the NFL, hard to win on the road, hard to win on the road on Thursday night.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
when everybody is looking at you, got an X on your back.
Yeah.
I think this was the best win of the year. Yeah. Definitely.
All right. All right, listen, when we get back, Sal, I want to talk to you about the beast that is the NFC East. Get your comments on the other three teams there. I want to talk about the Eagles the Eagles receiving crew as opposed to the rest of the NFL, where you think they would rank. And then let's do a quick top five, too, at the halfway point of the five top teams in the NFL. We're going to do all that with Sal Paolantonio when we get back on This Week in Pro Football.
First Bank is a true community bank with offices located throughout eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Being a First Bank customer comes with access to personal bankers, ones who know you and your business almost as well as you do. Joe Calabro is a regional president of First Bank and has been a leader and a lender in the southeastern Pennsylvania market for over 30 years. Call their Westchester office, 484-881-3800. First Bank is an equal opportunity lender and member FDIC.
Concrete Cutting Systems Incorporated, the concrete cutting specialists in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. These guys are celebrating their 28th anniversary as the industry leader in the field of concrete cutting and robotic demolition. Any type of concrete cutting or drilling, concrete demolition or interior excavating, call the specialists. Concrete Cutting Systems. They're the only full union concrete cutting company based in Philadelphia. Call the guys today at 215-533-0652. The website is concretecuttingsystems.net. Let's go Eagles.
UGI Energy Services knows how dedicated you are to your teams, and that's how they feel about their customers. UGI Energy Services, a natural gas and electric provider servicing Philadelphia and the surrounding areas for decades. They're your local partner for energy planning and budgeting with sound purchasing advice and direct pricing. UGI Energy Services values customers and believes in building honest relationships. Let them help you save money on your energy bill and make enjoying the game that much sweeter. Get started with a free quote today at ugies.com.
Cantor, Novak, Beaver & Pike is a full-service CPA firm with offices in PA and New Jersey, offering first-rate accounting, audit, and tax services. They focus on helping clients achieve their business and financial goals, from startup operation to long-term financial planning. For more information, call Terry Cantor or Dan Pike at 215-550-2954 or on the web at cnbpcpas.com.
Are you looking for a family-friendly fitness center in the heart of Bucks County? Spring Mill Athletic Club has programs and activities to offer the whole family for every age and season. Group classes, personal training, dance academy, summer camp, and more can be found at this non-intimidating environment. Come tour Spring Mill Athletic Club today and get a free 1-week trial membership. Visit us at springmillathletic.com for more information.
I want to be a game changer in construction. I want to be able to provide diversity in the workforce, and it starts at the top. I started Rodriguez Construction Group in 2013 with 2 employees, and we're 85 strong today. M&T has been a great partner since day one, providing us the access, the opportunity, the funding to be able to continue our growth. We can change the community in a positive way, one person at a time, one job at a time, and one family at a time. I think M&T Bank is very committed to the community, just like us.
Welcome back. This week in Pro Football, week number 9, the National Football League. Pat Callahan here. joined by my good friend and analyst with the NFL, and I should say that analyst on Sundays. You're going to be this Sunday, Sal, right? Up in the Meadowlands, is that right?
Buffalo Bills at New York Jets with the incomparable Steve Levy on the call. I'll be right next to him in the booth doing the analysis job. I got to tell you, Pat, I could get used to that. It's a lot. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Just remember now. Periodically, I'll just remind you: Ray Scott, Paul Crispin. Ray Scott, Paul Crispin. That's all you got to remember, right, Sal? but listen, I need to do a program announcement here, if I might, while Sal's on. We're going to move the show, which premieres Saturdays at 9 a.m., to Thursdays at 6. We're going to because we want to give it a couple more days for everybody to watch the show prior to the week's games. Thursday at 6. We will go live here on JAKIB Sports. I'm very excited about that. All right, Sal.
Nice.
Let's rumble here. First, let me do this with you. The beast that is the NFC East. I mentioned in the open how the team does not have the division doesn't have a team with a losing record in it. Just give me a couple sentences on each of how the Cowboys, how they're playing right now. Cowboys, Giants at the bye. And how about those Washington Commanders, winners of 3 straight?
Well, let's start with Washington. Taylor Heineke is playing with house money, right? Whether he wins or loses, it really doesn't affect his life.
Right.
They have no place else to go but the quarterback position. So he's playing fast and loose, and mostly he's playing really well.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, on Monday Night Football, a week from Monday, at the Link, the Eagles are 10.5-point favorites.
Yeah.
Early line on DraftKings against the Commanders. That will be 3 weeks in a row that the Eagles are double-digit favorites. And the reason why the Eagles are double-digit favorites is, they take the ball away and they play mistake-free football for the most part on offense. So they're the class of the division. I think the Giants are the number 2 team in the division. They can run the ball, and their coaching in the fourth quarter has been magnificent. He makes great adjustments, Brian Daboll. And so does Kafka in his play calling. And, of course, we know Wink Martindale is blitzing at a clip of 41%. They're the only team, Pat, in the National Football League blitzing over 40%. Everybody is 37% or under.
Right.
And it's because of Wink Martindale, and that has created havoc for opposing quarterbacks. And then the Dallas Cowboys, they got lucky, in my view, with Cooper Rush. And the luck ran out, and Dak Prescott came in, and then they got, they're getting a little bit more healthy. Yeah. The Cowboys' defense is for real, for sure, but the Eagles don't play them until week 16.
Right.
And by that time, a lot can change.
Agreed. I do think I would rank Dallas ahead of the Giants only because of the marked difference at quarterback. I'm still not sold on Daniel Jones. We'll see. But you can't argue with what you said about Daboll and the job that the Giants assistant coach.
Coaching is just better with the Giants than it is with Dallas. With Dallas, it could fold in a second. It could go under in a second. It's a crapshoot. It really is.
That's true. But all right, so I wanted to talk to you about wide receivers. Philadelphia's receivers in their last game against Houston, 14 receptions for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm talking about the 3 receivers now, 2 and a tight end, or however a team stacks up. Just give me your thoughts on where you would rank the Eagles trio of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert versus, say, Miami, which has gotten a lot of publicity for its 3 guys, Cincinnati with Jamar Chase being healthy. Where do you rank that Eagles group?
Well, I would say the Eagles group is right behind Kansas City in the class of the Kansas City Chiefs, for sure, in terms of reliability and explosiveness. You have a Hall of Fame tight end in Kansas City in Travis Kelce. You have a burner in Miami in Tyreek Hill. That's an outlier, so you really can't compare him to anybody else. And then you have Stephon Diggs in Buffalo, who is, in my view, the best pure wide receiver in the National Football League. No disrespect to your guy, Cooper Kupp, out there in Los Angeles. This year I'm talking about.
Right.
So I would put them – you have the explosiveness of Devontae Smith, the incredible toughness, reliability of A.J. Brown. Right. And then Dallas Goedert leads all tight ends in yards after the catch. And what are those numbers that I have on Dallas Goedert? 8 of 9 targets, 8 of 9 against Houston for 100 yards and a touch.
Yeah.
Pat, he's now caught 40 of 50 balls thrown to him. An 80% target ratio is the number one in the NFL among all tight ends.
Yeah.
So I go Kelsey, then I go Goddard. I'm sorry. I think he's the all-pro right now in the NFC.
Yeah. I don't argue that either. But I think as an overall group, if you take all of them together, I think the Eagles would rank. I have them right up there. Miami's first because Waddle, I think, is very underrated because Hill gets all the publicity. And then Buffalo, as you mentioned, Diggs is an outstanding receiver. Gabe Davis, if he stays healthy. But I got Philadelphia right behind that. So I think that A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith are a terrific wide receiver combination. And as you
only reason why I would quibble with you is Gesicki doesn't match up to Goddard.
No, he does
and
not.
Dawson Knox does not match up to Goddard.
Agreed on both.
We're in the same ballpark.
Yeah, it's close. And again, it speaks to Sal to how this all happened seemingly overnight. Now, it was the acquisition of A.J. Brown has lifted the entire offense. Now that, and the fact now that they're doing these chunk plays, the Eagle offense really is now it's
a lot of things, right? It's his ability, Brown, I'm talking about. His compatibility is off the charts. Best friends with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
And he's an extremely coachable player.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no ego in this gentleman whatsoever.
Oh, there you go.
We're not talking about T.O. here. We're not talking about
ego.
DJ
he
got his money and he realizes now he wants to get his ring.
Yeah.
And I think he's one of the top 3 acquisitions all time for this football team. I do.
All right, Sal, let's do a little top 5. Sal Pal presented by the good folks at First Bank in New Jersey. This is our first one of the year, Sal. We're at the halfway point for a number of teams. Next week will be the rest of them as we get through the buys. But I'd be interesting to hear your top 5 and where you rank those top 2, which I believe is clearly Buffalo and Philadelphia. How do you see it at this point?
Well, there was a certain guy on ESPN. We won't say what his name was, but he wears pocket squares and gets his clothes at Ventresca in Doylestown. Okay. He had the Bills and the Eagles in the Super Bowl on ESPN.com when we made our picks in August. You can look it up.
All right.
So I'm sticking with those 2 teams as the top 2 teams in the league. And I think it's 1 and 1A. Yeah. It's very difficult. So I look at point differential, Pat, especially this year. Why? Only 13 teams in the league going into week 9 have a positive point differential, Pat. Yeah. That's the lowest number going into week 9 since the NFL went to 32 teams. Lowest number ever.
Yeah.
So that point differential is so important. There's a haves in the league and a have-nots.
Right.
So Buffalo at 105 point differential, but the Eagles are undefeated. So I'm going to say Eagles are number 1. Buffalo is number 2. And that's a flip-flop. I had Buffalo number 1 last week. Yeah. But going on the road on Thursday night and taking care of business like that, that's a super quality win. So I give the Eagles the nod. Their point differential going into this week before Houston was plus 78, number 2 in the league. Kansas City's plus 51. Dallas is plus 50. San Francisco and Minnesota tied for plus 20. Pat, plus 29 is amazingly low, Pat.
Minnesota's not beaten. Most of their wins have come by 1 score or less, and yet there they are, Sal. They must be the most anonymous, nondescript 6-1 team in NFL history.
So what you had was volatility in the offseason. 193 free agents changed teams, most ever. And during the season, you had the most trade deadline trades ever in the NFL. So when you have volatility and upheaval, it tends to even, you know this in business, Pat, it tends to even everything out in terms of the competition, right?
Yeah.
So 55 games going into week 9 have been decided by 6 points or less. That's most ever in the league, ever.
Yeah.
Going into week 9.
Yeah. I would say, though, Sal, there is a clear-cut number 3 team, even above, say, like I have Minnesota 4, but the Chiefs are clearly, in my opinion, the number 3. Not that I think their defense it's a typical, if you will, Andy Reid defense. He doesn't, in my opinion, concentrate on it, but he is an offensive mastermind. And Mahomes appears to be playing with a chip on his shoulder to the extent that he doesn't want to hear about these young guns like Josh Allen. I think it's still a big hurdle for Buffalo to overcome. I know they beat them a couple of weeks ago, but there's a difference between October and January.
It depends where the game is played.
Right.
I mean, if it's in Buffalo in the AFC Championship game, you got to wear the blue socks, Pat. You got to wear the blue socks.
That's right, Seth. That is right. You will be socking it up then. But I have the Chiefs 3. And then, as you were just talking about, the parity in the league and how many players and coaches have changed places. I'd have Minnesota 4, but it's not, to me, there's a big drop between Kansas City, Minnesota. And then as far as that 5th spot, Sal, I think there's a number of teams you could throw in there.
Yeah, you could. Listen, we are getting ahead of ourselves big time, but, not for nothing. I'm going to St. John's Church in Collingswood, saying my prayers, because I definitely want an NFC Championship game in Philly as opposed to going to Buffalo for an AFC Championship at age 66. I don't need that cold weather in January.
I can understand that. But
Please.
You're not going to get weather like we have in Philadelphia this weekend. That just does not happen up by Lake Erie. So you're right, Sal. So I'll be praying for you too, pal. All right, listen, Sal, we're going to let you go here. I appreciate you taking all this time. It's great to have you on again this week. And good luck with that game Sunday. I hope the Jets give the Bills a game, Sal, but you might have some filler to talk about in the fourth quarter of that game. The difference between those two quarterbacks is substantial.
Yes.
And you may have, bring some anecdotes with you about Jack Kemp or something to talk about in the fourth.
We'll have Steve Levy do some hockey stories.
Okay. Very good. Sal, thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Pat.
All right, thank you, brother. The great Sal Paolantonio joining me here, as he always does here on This Week in Pro Football. And we look forward to talking to him again next week. When we get back, I think it's Cutillo. I think Tony Cutillo is going to join me. We're going to talk some fantasy football. And how about some performances last week? We'll get Tony's take on that when we come back on This Week in Pro Football.
I grew up in a home, and I wanted my kids to have that. The process of buying a home seemed so daunting, but Christine and M&T believed in me. Everyone took an interest and helped me through the process. You don't get this kind of service everywhere. I closed on the house and I didn't tell the kids. They were like, oh, you got the key? You closed on the home? They were so happy. M&T Bank made this dream come true for me and my girls.
UGI Energy Services knows how dedicated you are to your teams, and that's how they feel about their customers. UGI Energy Services, a natural gas and electric provider servicing Philadelphia and the surrounding areas for decades. They're your local partner for energy planning and budgeting with sound purchasing advice and direct pricing. UGI Energy Services values customers and believes in building honest relationships. Let them help you save money on your energy bill and make enjoying the game that much sweeter. Get started with a free quote today at UGIES.com.
At Whistler Pearlstein LLP, we assemble the most effective team to handle all of your legal needs. There are players and pretenders, but our hustle and heart set us apart. In practice now for over 75 years, we're proud to be one of the most prominent full-service law firms in the Philadelphia region. We offer 17 different areas of practice, including business, corporate, and tax education law, real estate, zoning, and land development, municipal law, and litigation. Our top-rated attorneys and staff are laser-focused on client success. We strive to provide outstanding legal counsel with the highest level of care and consideration. Let us show you the Whistler way. Learn more at WhistlerPearlstein.com or email Michael J. O'Donohue at mod@WhisPearl.com. WhistlerPearlstein.com or mod@WhisPearl.com.
Concrete Cutting Systems Incorporated, the concrete cutting specialists in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. These guys are celebrating their 28th anniversary as the industry leader in the field of concrete cutting and robotic demolition. Any type of concrete cutting or drilling, concrete demolition or interior excavating, call the specialists. Concrete Cutting Systems. They're the only full union concrete cutting company based in Philadelphia. Call the guys today at 215-533-0652. The website is concretecuttingsystems.net. Let's go Eagles.
It was late at night. I was browsing KennedyAuto.com when there was a knock at my door.
Hey, baby, what you doing?
Buying a car from John Kennedy Ford.
Online?
I let her in on the secret. KennedyAuto.com makes car buying easy. That got her attention.
Can I go for a ride?
Let me get my coat. KennedyAuto.com. Enjoy your ride.
Welcome back this week in pro football on JAKIB Sports. Pat Callahan joining you. Give me a follow, please, at TWIPF Pat. You can follow the network at JAKIB Sports as we rumble through preparing for Week 9 in the National Football League. All right, let's bring this guy on, Xander. That would be my arch nemesis. And from SiriusXM and Win Daily Sports, and apparently a close personal friend of Pablo Escobar, that would be Tony Cutillo. Tony, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Just got done undercover, Pat. You know, I'm all over. What can I say?
I know. I don't want to blow your cover here. The last thing I wanted to see is an obituary for Tony Cutillo. But what are you doing tweeting about Pablo Escobar?
Well, you know, I get lucky. I'm blessed, right? I run a PR company, and one of my clients, Robert Mazer, was an undercover agent who actually took down Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel. So, and now he lives to talk about it. Pretty interesting stuff.
I know. Well, that's great. Good for you, pal. It doesn't surprise me. A guy like you does PR. It doesn't. An outgoing guy like yourself, and as opposed to a bookworm.
It's a fun thing, man. It's a fun thing. Meet a lot of people.
Well, I'm sure you're familiar with the quote by John Greenleaf Whittier, Tony, who said, "Of all sad words of tongue or pen, the saddest of these it might have been." A very, very close friend of mine last week had to choose between Joe Mixon and Tony Pollard. Guess who he played?
I'm guessing he played Joe Mixon.
Yes, which makes, you know, and look, that's not a bad choice, right? It's not a bad choice. Monday night against the Browns, you figure, all right, the Bengals maybe getting it going here a little bit. And Tony Pollard goes off against the Bears. One of 5 guys, Tony, to score 3 touchdowns in the same week. Do you have any recollection of that happening before?
You know, I vaguely remember somebody else is doing that. I don't know if it was LaDainian Tomlinson or not, but I swear it was one of those cats.
I'll tell you, Tony, a lot of people, I think, may have by this time had sat Alvin Kamara thinking it's just not going to happen. I mean, he goes off. And then I'll tell you who's going to be who's going to be, I think, back in his number 1 spot going forward and run amongst running backs, especially with Jonathan Taylor just disappearing, is going to be CMC. I think he is picture perfect, Tony, for that offense.
I'm scared, Pat. I'm scared. Like, I know we're talking fantasy, but as a Philadelphia Eagle fan, I'm scared because that team is strong. He went to the perfect atmosphere, the perfect everything that it's like a perfect picture, like the Mona Lisa out there with Kyle Shanahan. And if he's healthy, look out. That was his only problem. He just wasn't healthy.
I know. And you know, it's funny you mentioned that because I've said that before, and I will stay with it. The NFC, with the exception of Philadelphia, appears to be almost a wasteland. I know Seattle's playing well, but I don't know, Tony, if anybody really takes the Seahawks that seriously. But that is one team, San Francisco, that I think that's one team I don't want coming to Philadelphia probably in January because I think they will rise to any occasion, the 49ers. Yeah. They're going to be a tough out.
I agree, and they have a top 5 defense too. We all forget it. Fred Warner is a beast in the middle of that lineup. So, and you have Bosa on the side. I mean, like, who do you even stop? It's crazy.
I know. All right, Tony, let's look at Week 9 here. By the way, Cutillo presented by the good folks at Concrete Cutting Systems. Tony, Week 9, you got 6 teams on a bye. A lot of guys sitting down. A lot of different names being thrown out there. A lot of guys hurt. So give me a couple of guys, both for DFS and for standard leagues, that you're thinking maybe can fill the void this week.
Well, here's the thing, man. You know, you talk about buys, you talk about injuries. Can we just say right now, we're going to make a statement on this show right now, Pat, that Tua, as long as he stays healthy, will be a top 5 quarterback in fantasy football the rest of the way. Possibly top 3. That's how good. I mean, you have to look at that offense, the way it's rolling right now. And Tyreek Hill is going to break records. You have Waddle catching everything thrown to him. And Tua, again, just has to stay healthy. So season long or DFS, you want him in there every single week because he is going to be electric. And then if you go by the running back position, I know everybody's worried about Nyheim Hines going to Buffalo. I'm not. I think that just catapults Devin Singletary to another level in the sense that he's just going to get more attempts running the ball with Hines in on third down. I have no problem with that. I think it's a really good atmosphere. Number one scoring offense in Buffalo. So give me that all day. And how about Kenyon Drake? You know, like everybody loves the Drake, a little Seinfeld reference, but I love Kenyon Drake. And Gus Edwards is not ready, Pat. So Drake is going to continue to get the run to rock on a team that loves to run the ball.
Yeah. Your thoughts on Deion Jackson? He's a popular pickup now with Jonathan Taylor. What the hell? You talk about a fall from grace. You know, it all seemed, Tony, to come from last year, week 17 against Jacksonville. And Indy lost and failed to make the playoffs. And it's just been completely downhill for Jonathan Taylor ever since. So tell me your thoughts on Jackson. Is he viable?
I like Jackson a lot. I tried to pick him up in multiple leagues, and unfortunately, not saying this cocky, but because I have a bunch of wins, it's hard for me to be on a high claim level, so I couldn't get him. But I think he's going to be very, very productive, especially with the young quarterback now, where you're going to have to run the ball. So no matter who's behind there, and he has speed. He's showing that speed. He's averaging like 4.2, 4.7 yards per carry in that offense. So he's definitely somebody that you want to have in the lineup.
All right. Tony, right after I cut him, somehow Justin Fields figured something out. I don't know what happened.
Pat. You shouldn't have cut him, man. I'm telling you.
You know what? I picked up Jimmy G when I cut him, and I'm okay with that. I think
I'm good with that too.
Talk about the 49ers. I think McCaffrey's going to catch as many touchdown passes as he's going to run touchdown runs. So, but tell me what happened to the Bears here. All of a sudden, they look like an offense. They play the Dolphins, who you were just talking about Sunday. Can you actually think at this point about throwing some Bears into your fantasy lineup?
Yeah, you can. And you know, you speak about that. I know they got Chase Claypool, but this only helps me catapult Darnell Mooney to another level.
I agree with you about that.
I do. Pat, I was in on Mooney, in the preseason, and I know he had a couple rough weeks, but if you just look at what he's done, he gets the volume as far as target share, and he was the number one wide receiver, so he was getting double covered sometimes. Yeah. Now he's not going to get that double coverage, and he's very talented. Yeah. Real fast on Justin Fields, I think finally the head coach finally said, Eberflus said, you know what? We need to play this guy's strengths. He's a running quarterback. He's never going to be a pocket passer. Let him get out, make things happen. They start to do that, and you're finally seeing him get some confidence.
Yeah, he does look way better. Then I just think back, Tony, it was a Monday night game. I forget who they were playing. Remember, he had his tight end wide open in the end zone. He overthrew him by about 10 yards.
It wasn't even close.
Yeah, but now all of a sudden it appears as if he's relaxed a little bit, and the Bears are playing decent football now. That's a tough game because you're right about Miami. I think Miami's going to be a tough out now. They are going all in like the Rams did last year. The Bradley Chubb trade hopefully boosts Miami's defense and special teams. Miami's going to be tough. They're taking their shot. But, how about that? We're talking fantasy football, and we're actually discussing the Chicago Bears. How about
that? Yes, and the Miami Dolphins. Even though it's who would have thought, right? I mean, we're talking about some low budget teams here. No more Brady and Rodgers anymore on this show.
I know. How about that? You're right. We don't even discuss any Buccaneers or Packers. That just goes to show. We're always prepared. We're always flexible here. All right, Tony, where does everybody find Tony Cutillo, for God's sake, when you're not out busting drug cartels? Where do people find you for some last minute fantasy information?
You listen, you can follow me right there at Judge Jigsaw. You see on the screen. You can follow me at T Cutillo 23 as well. Win Daily Sports, Heat Ratio Sports, The Final Judgment, Sirius XM, and make sure you get Khalif Raymond and Evan Ingram in your lineup this weekend.
There you go. All right. Well, look, you all heard it here first. If Tony, if you read in Sunday's paper that Tony got thrown off the Tacony-Palmyra Bridge in some sort of revenge killing, remember we broke the story here on This Week in Pro Football. All right. All right, Tony.
I'll be careful, man. I'll watch my back.
Don't worry about it. All right, listen, thanks a lot for joining me, pal. Appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you next week. All right.
Always. Have a good week, Pat.
All right. The great Tony Cutillo joining me here this week in Pro Football. When we get back, let's get down and dirty, some props and some picks with the great Sean Green from SGPN. Joins me on This Week in Pro Football.
Concrete Cutting Systems Incorporated, the concrete cutting specialists in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. These guys are celebrating their 28th anniversary as the industry leader in the field of concrete cutting and robotic demolition. Any type of concrete cutting or drilling, concrete demolition, or interior excavating, call the specialists. Concrete Cutting Systems. They're the only full union concrete cutting company based in Philadelphia. Call the guys today at 215-533-0652. The website is concretecuttingsystems.net. Let's go Eagles.
UGI.
First Bank is a true community bank with offices located throughout eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Being a First Bank customer comes with access to personal bankers, ones who know you and your business almost as well as you do. Joe Calabro is a regional president at First Bank and has been a leader and a lender in the southeastern Pennsylvania market for over 30 years. Call their Westchester office, 484-881-3800. First Bank is an equal opportunity lender and member FDIC.
UGI Energy Services knows how dedicated you are to your teams, and that's how they feel about their customers. UGI Energy Services, a natural gas and electric provider servicing Philadelphia and the surrounding areas for decades. They're your local partner for energy planning and budgeting with sound purchasing advice and direct pricing. UGI Energy Services values customers and believes in building honest relationships. Let them help you save money on your energy bill and make enjoying the game that much sweeter. Get started with a free quote today at ugies.com. Where do you tailgate when your team's away? Join Judd's and Jackson's at Spring Mill for their first ever Birds Tailgate Party on Sunday, September 25th, starting at noon under the tent. Enjoy a full tailgate buffet from only $26.95 per person, along with specials at the bar. Celebrate with friends cheering on our hometown team. Judd's and Jackson's at Spring Mill Athletic Club. Visit juddsdining.com for more details.
Evolution Energy Partners has helped hundreds of businesses save millions of dollars on their energy spend. They offer electricity and gas procurement strategies, efficiency audits and engineering and financing solutions, as well as online utility bill management. To learn how your business can save, visit www.evolutionep.com or contact Chuck Herschella at 610-329-8288. Evolution Energy Partners, energy solutions to improve your bottom line.
I want to be a game changer in construction. I want to be able to provide diversity in the workforce, and it starts at the top. I started Rodriguez Construction Group in 2013 with 2 employees, and we're 85 strong today. M&T has been a great partner since day one, providing us the access, the opportunity, the funding to be able to continue our growth. We can change the community in a positive way, one person at a time, one job at a time, and one family at a time. I think M&T Bank is very committed to the community, just like us.
Welcome back this week in Pro Football, number 9, the National Football League here on JAKIB Sports. Pat Callahan joining you. And joining me right now to talk some props and some lines and some betting would be my friend Sean Green from the Bet SGPN and the Sports Betting Podcast. Sean, how you doing?
Doing great. Good to hear from you, Pat. Yeah, coming off a 3-0 week. Eagles moved 8-0. Unfortunately, the Phils couldn't pull it off. But, yeah, good week overall.
I got to tell you, look, the show's called This Week in Pro Football, but please, what are the Phillies going to do with Rhys Hoskins? Do you know, Tony, that the Phillies 2, 3, and 5 hitters went 0 for 15 with 7 strikeouts. I mean, you're not going to beat the Pirates in April. Never mind beat the Astros in November with that kind of
yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, the bats were so hot. That's a big reason why they were there. They had 5 home runs in the game and then haven't gotten much going since. So
I know.
Still hope and a prayer. We'll see. Yeah,
it's a hope and a prayer now. If we beat that team twice down there, no, sorry. But anyway, let's talk some football. By the way, everybody check out this guy, the SGPN and the Sports Gambling Podcast. I got to ask you, what is gut handicapping, which is a Sean Green specialty?
Yeah, so I guess I've been picking games for a long time. We started the podcast in 2011. I there's so many people now where it's like, hey, I got a model and then this formula and I'm using analytics.
Yeah, right.
I'm the old school guy. You know, I got a couple trends, I got stats, but I sit there every Sunday and just watch all the games. We got 8 TVs. And I listen to my gut as far as, who to take and who's going to show up and who's not. So I fancy myself a gut handicapper.
Good for you. Good for you. And it's obviously worked very, very well for you, and you've done it extremely well. Let me just get your thoughts, Sean, on the Eagles win over the Texans 29-17. I thought it was notable. Now, there were a number of different numbers there. The Eagles were 13, but there were a lot of 12.5s out there. And lo and behold, what happens? The Eagles go for 2. Now, the 12.5 still wouldn't have covered. But imagine if you if you happen to have that, the Eagles at least with 12, they go for 2, they get it, and the Eagles end up winning by 12 instead of 11.
Well, kind of similar on that situation. I was debating on our podcast to give out the team total of the Eagles at 29 or over 3.5 touchdowns. So I was going back and forth. I'm like, what's more likely? Do they go over 29? Do they get the 4? Luckily I gave out over 3.5 touchdowns. That hit, but the 29 sat right at the push because Jake Elliott ended up missing that 54-yarder. But overall, I mean, this is would have been a perfect letdown spot for the Eagles, right? Non-conference road game. You're favored by 13 points. The Texans have nothing to lose. They're on prime time. They're going to get up for the game. They have Dameon Pierce. The Eagles look a little sloppy with their run defense, especially on the road. But other than that, I mean, Jalen Hurts played another very good game and just kind of willed the team to win. I mean, again, like the Eagles fans, the media are acting like they lost. Meanwhile, it's a 12-point road victory.
I know. Yeah.
So, things could be much worse. So I think it's finding that good line where it's like, hey, guys, we got stuff to work on, but we also still got a double-digit win. So I'm optimistic.
The famous saying, on any given Thursday, you hear it all the time in the NFL. But Sean, before we get to props and picks here, I just want to run one other thing by you. And that is, of course, last week I go and pick the Rams like a dope. And they looked horrible. They're finished. I'm sorry, Sean. I know you're an LA guy. I know you love the Rams, but they're finished. But anyway, San Francisco has now beaten them 8 straight during the regular season. The Patriots, I mentioned earlier in the show, have beaten the Jets 13 straight times in the regular season. When you're doing either gut handicapping or just looking at games like that and you come across something, how much does that factor in? I mean, does that, even though the players have totally changed, the coaches may have changed, do you still weigh something like that in when you're looking at a game?
Yeah, I mean, with the Jets, specifically that one, because Bill Belichick still has a chip on his shoulder. Whatever went down with him and the Jets, he gets worked up for the Cleveland games and the games against the Jets, and we'll talk about it later. But the Colts, I think, are also on his short list there. And we do find these interesting trends in division, whereas like the Colts can never win down in Jacksonville. Even years where Jacksonville's really bad and the Colts are good, they still figure out how to lose games down in Jacksonville. Or, Seattle, Arizona. That's another good example. I think 11 out of the last 16 games, the road team has won. So I do look at those. That's that kind of stuff, especially in division. If it's a non-conference trend or something like that, I probably don't weigh it as much. But the division teams, they know each other, and I don't know what it is, but certain stuff picks up. And Shanahan, Oni McVay in the regular season is certainly one of them.
And it's fascinating to see, like you mentioned, the Colts going down to Jacksonville. How many different coaches have there been at both the Colts and the Jaguars? The players turn over every 3-4 years, and yet the Colts as a franchise can't win in Jacksonville. It's a fascinating thing. All right, Sean, let me, by the way, Sean Green presented by the good folks at UGI. Sean, how about a couple of props out there? The Eagles have already played, but find me a couple others that you think are notable that people might look at for this week.
Yeah, well, I heard you guys talking in the segment before about Justin Fields. Love Justin Fields over his rushing prop, 48.5 yards. He's gone over that 4 out of the last 5 games. And, you guys were talking about it for fantasy, and I think it applies to the props as well. Like they realized, hey, this guy is a running quarterback. We're going to design some runs for him. And they're finally doing it. He's getting like 8 to 10 carries a game. It looks like it might be a windy game in Chicago as well. One more reason for him to run. And if you watch that Dolphins Steelers game, there was a ton of opportunities there for Kenny Pickett to run the ball against the Dolphins defense. So I think he's gonna have opportunities. They're designing runs for him, and he's a pretty good runner. So over 48.5 rush yards for Justin Fields.
All right. Yeah, the Bears, all of a sudden, everybody's talking about those Chicago Bears. How about
Bears?
All right, Tony, let's get to the picks, pal. You were 3-0 last week. Of course, you've got the con. I'm looking at your website now. I see you've got a couple of locks that I guess you're going to talk about. Tell me who you like for week number 9.
Well, starting off, Las Vegas Raiders laying 1.5 in Jacksonville. I mean, this Jacksonville team, they were talking AFC championship when they were 2-1. They've lost 5 straight now. They've kind of fallen apart as a team coming back from England. That's a tough spot for them. But really, teams coming off a shutout, 27-10 against the spread. And I think the Raiders were dealing with the flu. A lot of the players were sick. I think that was part of their poor output against the New Orleans Saints. And then also Trevor Lawrence, I just think really hasn't found his way yet in this league. Trevor Lawrence right now, Pat, I came across this stat. This blew my mind. He is 1-20 in games where his defense has allowed 11 or more points. So if the defense can put up, or the offense can put up 11 points for the Raiders, they got a good chance to win the game. The number's pretty small. So, yeah, give me the Raiders -1.5.
We were talking about it. I teased it actually at the start of the show about the 21 draft class, quarterbacks-wise, has not measured up to some of its predecessors. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence. I said Zach Wilson. Sorry, I'm not drinking that Kool-Aid. Mac Jones, I think the jury's still out on Mac Jones. You agree?
Yeah, no, 100%. He looked good early last year, but he hasn't looked comfortable this year. He's dealt with injury. And then the other one would be Justin Fields, who he's playing slightly better. But, man, none of these guys, you normally see top-level quarterbacks make a jump in that second year. We just haven't seen any of it really from these guys.
No, we have not. All right, who else you like besides the Vegas Raiders?
Yeah, give me the New England Patriots laying 5.5 at home against the Colts quarterback, Sam Ehlinger. There's a ton of good stats about Bill Belichick versus a rookie quarterback. Now, technically, Ehlinger isn't a rookie quarterback because he was drafted the year before, but he didn't play at all last year. He's making his second start. He's making his first road start, and he's going up against this New England defense. I think you're getting a discounted price here because of the struggles of the Patriots offense, but I think this is a good spot for them. And now it looks like Jonathan Taylor is going to be out as well. So, and they traded away Naheem Hines. Like, it's just going to be Ehlinger trying to throw to Pittman, maybe Deion Jackson. I think it's just a great matchup for this Patriots defense. So I don't think Mac Jones is going to have to do too much. Ramondre Stevenson should be able to get loose a little bit. So 5.5 feels like a good number. So, yeah, give me the Pats there at home.
All right, give me one more.
One more, final one. I'm going back to the Seattle Seahawks, catching 1.5, maybe 2 points here in Arizona. I just love this Seahawks team. I mentioned that trend before about having the Seahawks-Arizona matchups. The road team kind of just figures out ways to win. And this Cardinals team, to the opposite side, they just figure out ways to lose. Yeah. I know DeAndre Hopkins is back, and Kyler Murray's kind of a different quarterback with him. But take a look at this rookie cornerback for the Seahawks, Tariq Woolen, leading the league or right up there with interceptions. I think they can create some great I think you can create some turnovers on Kyler. And I just love Geno Smith. Kenneth Walker looks great in that backfield. This team has confidence, and I think Pete Carroll's doing a good job of coaching them. So
I think Pete Carroll is just an outstanding coach. I think he wrings everything he can get out of that team. And there's a team that lost its quarterback and hasn't missed a beat. And how he's done it with Geno Smith, it's an amazing thing. And the other thing about that game, Sean, if I had to rank teams with the worst home field advantage, clearly 31 and 32 were the two Los Angeles teams, but I think Arizona sits there at 30. I don't think there's any juice at all in that stadium. I think Seattle's one of my picks. You stole it.
Nice. Great minds think alike. But that Arizona, there's no home field. I mean, I went to that Cardinals-Eagles game. Right. It felt like an Eagles home game. Yeah. And are they going to show up now that they've lost couple more games? I think, and you got Kyler yelling at his coach. Just bad vibes.
Yeah, I know. There wasn't much made of that. Man, I'll tell you, I'd have sat him down and then sit down. I'll put you back in when I feel like it. Don't tell me to calm down. You don't know what the hell.
Plays off, man.
Yeah. I also like Sean. I'm going to round out my picks here. Look, either Tampa Bay or Los Angeles. Somebody's going to get it right at some point. I'm going Tampa. I'm sorry. I've had it. I've had it with the Rams. And the reason why is because that Raheem Morris plays that bend but don't break. He's made a Hall of Famer out of Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, the rest of the league has Garoppolo. The I'm going to go Tampa Bay -2.5. I think the Rams they just play far too soft at defense. So I'm going to go with Tampa Bay there. And then my last one, I'm going to go with Atlanta +3. I'm really against these LA teams, Sean. The Chargers, I'm not buying the Chargers either as a road favorite. I'm going to go Atlanta +3. The Falcons play hard every single week. And I think they're going to beat Los Angeles outright on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm with you on both those picks. I mean, you didn't mention it, probably worth adding in there. Cooper Kupp dealing with an ankle injury, and he's obviously been the entire offense for the Rams. So I think that's going to hurt them as well. And then, yeah, I'm with you. Like the Chargers, they're super banged up. No Mike Williams, no Keenan Allen. And, for them to go on the road, we'll see. And I expect to see a good effort out of the Falcons as well. So, yeah, I like both those.
Yeah. All right, Sean Green, I talked about the fact that you're on the SGPN website and the Sports Gambling Podcast. Why don't you just remind everybody where they can find you and what else is on that site?
Yeah, sportsgamblingpodcast.com. We got tons of articles, picks, podcast. We have a SGPN app. You can just type that in the app store. You can get all our podcast picks, videos. If it's a sport and you can bet on it, we're covering it. So sportsgamblingpodcast.com.
All right. Well done. Well done, Sean. Thanks a lot for joining me. I appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you next week. All right.
All right. Take it easy, Pat.
All right. Sean Green joining me there from the Bet SGPN website, Sports Gambling Podcast. It's all over the place in the National Football League now. All right. When we get back, I'm going to be joined by the great Gary Myers. We're going to talk and we're going to go around the National Football League. And we're going to talk about, those Washington Commanders when we get back here on This Week in Pro Football.
UGI Energy Services knows how dedicated you are to your teams, and that's how they feel about their customers. UGI Energy Services, a natural gas and electric provider servicing Philadelphia and the surrounding areas for decades. They're your local partner for energy planning and budgeting with sound purchasing advice and direct pricing. UGI Energy Services values customers and believes in building honest relationships. Let them help you save money on your energy bill and make enjoying the game that much sweeter. Get started with a free quote today at UGIES.com.
For the team at Cordasco Financial Network, a part of Mercer Advisors, financial planning is about more than just managing your money. They guide you in making retirement, tax, insurance, and estate planning decisions by creating a plan based entirely on your individual needs. Plus, Cordasco Financial Network professionals work one-on-one with business owners in creating and managing company 401k plans, IRAs, and defined benefit plans. They can help you maximize plan efficiency, ensure full regulatory compliance, and optimize tax obligations. Call 855-558-3500 or click the link in the description below to learn more. Let their team help you secure your future. 855-558-3500. Cordasco Financial Network is a trade name owned by Mercer Global Advisors, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Andrew Garrett Incorporated, which is not affiliated with Cordasco Financial Network or Mercer Advisors. Client experiences vary. Successful outcomes not guaranteed.
Johnny Apple's Restaurant and Bar opened in 2001 and for over 20 years has been serving great food and good times to Bucks County residents, friends, and family. Ideally located at 184 Buck Road in Holland, Johnny Apple's offers a terrific array of steaks, seafood, and daily specials. They also host private parties and affairs of any size. For excellent food, great company, and a relaxed lunch or dinner, check out Johnny Apple's Restaurant at 215-953-9900 or at johnnyapplesrestaurant.com.
Concrete Cutting Systems Incorporated, the concrete cutting specialists in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. These guys are celebrating their 28th anniversary as the industry leader in the field of concrete cutting and robotic demolition. Any type of concrete cutting or drilling, concrete demolition or interior excavating, call the specialists. Concrete Cutting Systems. They're the only full union concrete cutting company based in Philadelphia. Call the guys today at 215-533-0652. The website is concretecuttingsystems.net. Let's go Eagles.
I want to be a game changer in construction. I want to be able to provide diversity in the workforce, and it starts at the top. I started Rodriguez Construction Group in 2013 with 2 employees, and we're 85 strong today. M&T has been a great partner since day one, providing us the access, the opportunity, the funding to be able to continue our growth. We can change the community in a positive way, one person at a time, one job at a time, and one family at a time. I think M&T Bank is very committed to the community, just like us.
Welcome back this week in pro football. Pat Callahan joining you, going through week number 9, the National Football League here on JAKIB Sports. We round out the show today with my good friend Gary Myers joining me. Gary, a longtime New York Daily News, Dallas Morning News columnist, and the author, of course, of Brady versus Manning, The Catch, How About Them Cowboys, and another book coming out, right, Gary, later on. How's that going?
Almost done, Pat, called Once a Giant, coming out next September. So we can talk more about that as the season goes along, if you like.
Very good. Once a Giant. So, well, pretty storied franchise to write a book about. I would say that the Giants sitting at a gaudy 6-2 going into their bye, Gary. But let's talk about briefly, let's get around the league here, Gary, presented by the good folks at M&T Bank. Trade deadline. You're starting to see more trades in the NFL that most years, Gary, would just come and go. Nobody would do anything. Do you see one team in particular that may have helped itself out more than most?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that there's more trades because the NFL pushed the deadline back a couple of weeks to early November. It used to be like maybe the first or second week in October, and this gives teams more of an opportunity to assess where they're at.
Right.
And whether it's worth keeping players that they don't intend to sign when the season is over. So they can adjudge themselves after 8 or 9 games rather than after 5 or 6 games. I think Miami, for immediate help, made the most impactful move getting Bradley Chubb.
Right.
And, a really good pass rusher. They signed him to a new contract, an extension right away. So it's not a rental for a first-round pick, which I never thought they would give up that much just to have the guy for the second half of the season. But it really indicates to me that the Dolphins see an opening here, and they're going for it. I don't know that they'll catch the Bills in the division, but I think, history has shown that you don't necessarily have to get that first-round bye in all the home games in order to make a really good Super Bowl run. So I think Miami really helped themselves. And then this didn't happen at the deadline, but it was certainly a trade. San Francisco getting Christian McCaffrey just changes everything. I would say, despite the fact that the 49ers are 4-4, if you're going to say to me right now, who do you think from the NFC is getting to the Super Bowl? I'm picking the 49ers.
How about that? You're not picking the Philadelphia Eagles, Gary, showing a little New York chip on your shoulder there.
No, I like Philadelphia and the people of Philadelphia. Right. That has nothing to do with that. I'm just trying to be objective here.
Yeah.
That the 49ers defense, when they're healthy, it can be dominant. Yeah. And I think the presence of McCaffrey and Debo and Brandon Ayuk can overcome the fact that the 49ers do not have an elite quarterback. But Jimmy G has gotten them to a Super Bowl, and he's played in an NFC Championship game. The fact that they have a lot of weapons now and do not have to rely on him trying to win games, but rather just trying to manage them and not to lose them, I think that formula can work. I don't know that it's sustainable to try to play around your quarterback, but we're halfway through the season. No team other than the Eagles really, to me, has stood out. I know the Vikings, played well. The Giants are really kind of a mirage at 6-2. Yeah. So I think there, again, like I talked about the Dolphins, I think there's an opening in the NFC that the 49ers see.
I think you're right, Gary. We were talking about it actually in the prior segment with Sean Green, that the 49ers to me are the biggest threat to the Eagles. They're the one team, if you're an Eagles fan, you don't want to see coming in January. I think McCaffrey was made for that San Francisco offense, and they're going to be a tough out the rest of the season. Gary, on the flip side, the Green Bay Packers did nothing at the trade deadline. Now, they historically are a team that doesn't like to make those kind of moves. But this was a team seemingly, Gary, that was crying out for some needed help at wide receiver, and yet nothing at all. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I definitely was surprised. I was surprised, how they've handled the draft the last few years, not putting themselves in a position to get one of the, top 2 or 3 receivers by moving up. They were in on it with Chase Claypool. I've heard that they made an offer of a second-round pick, but when the Bears stepped up, the Steelers probably evaluated it and figured, that the Bears pick is going to be better. It's not the Bears pick that they got from Baltimore for Roquan Smith, which would probably be a little bit lower down, but it's their own pick. So They got outbid by a team in their own division, but I think they had identified Claypool as the guy that they wanted. I'm still not exactly sure why so many teams wanted Claypool, but the team that had him didn't want him.
I think it's fair, Gary. I think it's fair. Claypool was clearly, in my opinion, the third best receiver on that team. So I guess the Steelers thought he was expendable. But
yeah, and I also understand what the Bears did. Giving up.
I agree.
Smith and Quinn, and then trading for. I know they're trying to find a guy for Justin Fields. I mean, every one of these young quarterbacks needs, a really, really good receiver in order to develop. But what kind of message did they just send in that locker room?
Yeah.
By trading, two of their best defensive players.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gary. And that's the fact is the Bears sit at they're 3-5, but still, I mean, as you mentioned, the NFC's kind of wide open too. There's 7 playoff spots, and yet you trade 2 of your defensive stalwarts. I thought it was an odd move by the Bears, but the Packers clearly they're an odd organization.
Yeah.
Before we get to the other odd organization,
I can only imagine who that is.
But just a word, Gary, from you concerning the Tampa Bay Bucks. They play the Rams this week in a game that I think might be a play-out game, meaning that the loser of that game might just be finished for the season. Yeah. But your thoughts on Tampa still? I had postulated earlier that perhaps the team's stars are just getting too old. They're all on the older side of the NFL bell curve, if you will. Guys like Godwin, Fournette, Brady, Evans. Is Tampa going to be able to make a run here?
I really think that they are. Now, I didn't see Brady's press conference this week, but from what I was reading about it, he seemed to be kind of a different guy than he's been the last few weeks. Like a weight has been lifted from his shoulders, and he was a little more upbeat. I'm not going to say that, from what I've heard, I haven't talked to Tom, in a while, but this whole personal stuff he was going through with the divorce, and I'm sure he, from what I've heard, he did not want to get divorced, but it's been hanging over him for quite a while. And I think that's the reason he left training camp for 10 days, going on a family vacation, trying to salvage things. And maybe things had and I'm just speculating here, maybe things had just gotten so bad that the finality of the divorce maybe was a weight lifted from him. And now he's ready to let it rip. Yeah. That he's very dedicated to his children. He spent a lot of time with them on the bye weekend that they, not actually a bye, but they played on that Thursday night.
Right.
Maybe he's come to grips in his mind on how his life is going to be for the foreseeable future now that he's not divorced. And maybe that is why these reports came out of his press conference the other day that, he seemed to be in a much more lighthearted mood than he's displayed all season. And he didn't come back to not make the playoffs. And I bet he's been a beast in practice this week, trying to get his guys ready for a second half run.
I think Tampa, they play the Rams. I think they're going to win that game Sunday. Then they play Seattle in Munich. The NFL never-ending attempts to wring every possible dollar out of the rest of the globe. Then it's Cleveland and Seattle, winnable games. So Tampa Bay could get on a little bit of a run here, Gary.
Yes.
All right, Gary, I want to spend the last few minutes we have together talking about the news that broke this week that the Washington Commanders, we all know them as the Redskins and one of the NFL's more storied franchises, is possibly now going to go up for sale. Just give me your thoughts on this franchise. I know you've made reference to it in prior shows, how it's an absolute used car lot of an NFL front office. But just give me your thoughts on it. The Washington team. Is this the only real salvation that team has, is really to clean house from the top down?
Absolutely. And that's why I don't buy. I know the Washington statement the other day did not specify whether Snyder's selling a controlling interest or is looking for new limited partners. I can't imagine anybody wants to plunk a bunch of money into that franchise and not have control of it and be Daniel Snyder's partner. Right. And why would you want to do that?
No.
So I think there's a good chance that he knows that the momentum is building to the point where there's an opportunity for the owners to vote him out of the league, which they have the right to do with 24 votes. I think the walls are closing in on him somewhat with some of these investigations that are going on.
Yeah.
And his team has been valued at $5.5 billion.
Yeah.
So why would you want to continue to own a franchise, a public franchise like this, a public trust, so to speak, and have everybody hate you?
Yeah.
None of these municipalities want to do business with him as far as a new stadium. So he's kind of handcuffed in that regard. Whatever financial deal he could work out, these towns still don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So in order to get the team out of that, I don't know how you want to describe FedEx Field, but it's a disaster. I mean, they can't sell tickets. It's a horrible place in the middle of nowhere, basically. I know the first choice, or at least one of the first choices, is to build where RFK Stadium is. And I think some of these other investors will be able to get a deal done there. So I think for the good of the franchise moving forward, Snyder has to be out. And quite frankly, I don't know that he's going to ultimately will have a choice in this anyhow. So it wouldn't have surprised me if Roger had gone to him and said, listen, go out on your own terms here, get the best deal you can. Don't make us vote to throw you out on the street. You don't want to go through that public humiliation. So just, we're going to give you some time here to do it on your own. That's what I think happened.
All right. Yeah, that's very plausible the way you describe it, Gary. I think that's exactly right. Why not go out with $5.5 billion in your pocket? Because you're right. It just seems like that franchise is just never going to go anywhere under Snyder.
No.
And you're right. The league's not going to cooperate with him. So best to get out and try and restore what was for a long time one of the premier franchises
absolutely.
in the NFL.
Pat, let me tell you this. When I was at the Daily News in the fall of '99, which was Snyder's first year owning the franchise, I went down there and did a story on him. And I sat with him for a really long time in his office. He was like 31 or 32 years old.
Yeah.
And had more money than anybody can even dream of at that age. He was a tremendous businessman.
Yeah.
And I walked out of there thinking, this is like Jerry Jones Jr. In that he's going to be very involved in his franchise.
Right.
This is before the Cowboys, the arrow started pointing down. They had just won
3 Super Bowls in a decade, right?
Yeah, they were only like 4 years into their 25-year demise. But I really thought Snyder was going to be good. He was enthusiastic. He loved the team. He was a fan growing up. He just never surrounded himself with the right people. He got too involved in thinking in making emotional decisions. It was a combination of Jerry Jones and George Steinbrenner. And
he was. You're right. Always first in line at the free agent window,
right?
With the signing of the big free agent, which never worked out.
Right.
So you're right about that. So I think it's going to be a good thing for Washington.
Yeah, absolutely.
End up switching that off. All right, Gary Myers. I want everybody to go out and you can load up your entire library with Gary Myers books. Brady versus Manning, The Catch. How about those Cowboys? Just all great stuff, Gary. We look forward to the next book, and I look forward to talking to you next week. If you'll join me, and we'll talk about the Week 10 in the National Football League. All right.
That sounds great, Pat. Thanks a lot,
Gary. Thanks very much. Great, Gary Myers joining me there. Sandra, if you could bring up here, we got about a minute left here. Just bring up the Week 9 schedule here. We can close on that. Looking at the current week's games, nothing great. It's an odd window, quite frankly. Most of the games are at 1 o'clock. There's only a couple late afternoon games. Los Angeles is at Tampa Bay. Most of the nation's going to see that one. The Sunday night game, Tampa against Kansas City. I'm sorry, Tennessee against Kansas City. Should be a good game. Not sure if Tennessee's quarterback is going to be playing there. You might see Malik Williams again. So I don't know. But Kansas City playing on a roll. It's going to be hard for Tennessee to win that game. And then Monday night's game, the Ravens at the Saints. Saints looked good last week. Ravens did too, beating Tampa. So pretty evenly matched Monday night game. The Eagles have already played, so not much going on at 1 o'clock. Not a great slate. 6 teams off. All right, so that'll do it for this week's show, This Week in Pro Football here on JAKIB Sports. I appreciate everybody watching and joining me to close out week number 9 in the NFL. We look forward to talking to you again next week on This Week in Pro Football.